So the other day, I was working from home and I noticed I was having a hard time focusing on the task at hand because I was pretty hungry and therefore low on energy. To remedy the situation, I made my way to the kitchen, whipped up an egg and cheese bagel, which was quite delicious, I might add, and then simply got back to work. I thought to myself though, damn, this egg and cheese bagel legit restored my energy. And because I like to compare real-life situations to video games all the time, like when I'm taking off from a plane and try to calculate the maximum height I could receive fall damage from and still survive, it made me think about all the various ways you can restore energy/health in video games as well. Now in the real world, like I just mentioned, we have stuff like food, obviously medicine's another one, sometimes a good night's rest is all you need, but in video games, it's entirely dependent on the context of the universe in which the game is set in. This often either leads to some pretty unique methods of restoring health, some methods that make absolutely no sense at all, or sometimes a combination of both, because let's be honest, real-life logic doesn't always apply to video games. I mean, yeah, the egg and cheese bagel gave me a little boost of energy,
Cheese is good.
but if I took that same thing and gave it to someone like Mega Man, for example, he would just look at it and be like,
Well, what should I do?
and likewise, if I took a energy pack battery or some shit and tried to insert it in one of the various orifices located on my body, I think it's safe to say subpar results would likely be achieved. Now, in the example of Mega Man, being that he's a robot of sorts, of course it makes sense that something like an energy pack would restore his health over something like food. A lot of games do have ways to recover health which thematically fit the universe in which it's set in, especially more recent games, as a lot of developers really go for realism nowadays. But back in the day, it wasn't always as common as it is now, so the Mega Man series is kind of a rare example of that. I mean, look at Mario for example. The dude runs into a mushroom and doubles in size. Does it make sense? No. Is it iconic? Yeah, at least now it is. Let's take the homeboy Sonic as well. Normal hedgehogs eat like grain pellets or something to recover health, right? But what does Sonic do? This dude be out here on the brink of death, and his first reaction is to start collecting some rings like he's Frodo or on some Michael Jordan shit. Now, how do rings heal him exactly? I don't know, man. I could be up all night thinking about this shit. And where does he keep all those rings at in the first place? Dude's got no pants, dude's got no pockets. The logic, or lack thereof, is quite interesting, but hey, that little sound effect that plays when you collect rings is catchy as fuck and gives you a nice little dopamine hit that keeps you coming back for more and more. A lot of older platformers follow this trend. Crash Bandicoot is another example where running into these tribal masks of sorts to recover health doesn't really make much sense necessarily, but it was something different and therefore memorable. These various ways of restoring health are fairly nonsensical for the most part, but that's exactly what makes them stand out and how they became synonymous with the image of their respective series. I mean, when's the last time you looked at some Mario merchandise and didn't see a mushroom everywhere? Besides Mario himself, the mushroom has become the icon to represent the series as a whole. Just think if it had used a more generic way of recovering health like a lot of other games did back then, like collecting food or hearts. What else would we eat generic, bland, overpriced candy out of that you only bought in the first place because your curiosity got the best of you when you were waiting in a long-ass line? Even though it was real common back then for a lot of games to use hearts as a method of restoring health, there is one series that managed to make it pretty memorable and iconic. Of course, I'm talking about none other than the infamous heart container from the Zelda series. Now, a good chunk of its long-lasting popularity does stem from how beloved and amazing the series is, but that's definitely not all of it. Zelda is a series that's all about exploration and progression, and the heart container symbolizes those elements perfectly. You have to thoroughly explore the world to come across these heart containers in the first place, which gives you a real sense of accomplishment when you do find them. Not only do they fully restore your health, but it permanently increases it, so it's basically like you're leveling up Link. Now you can survive some attacks you would have died from earlier in the game, so it actually feels like you're getting stronger and progressing, which is super satisfying. The most recent entry in the series, Breath of the Wild, keeps the legendary heart container while introducing a more traditional method of restoring health through the form of food while traversing the world. This was definitely inspired by a lot of modern-day AAA open-world games as Zelda tried to do its own unique take on it, and I think it was quite successful as it didn't fully abandon its trademarks of the series in the process. Final Fantasy is another long-running series that incorporated more realistic ways of restoring health by eating food in its 15th entry, while still keeping its original ways of using potions, using cure magic, and staying at inns. Now, the 7 remake, for whatever reason, decided to add sitting on a bench as a way of recovering health as well, which if you ask me is a little bit silly, I think. I mean, you can be beaten to shit, seeing red, poison, various other status effects, but hey, just go sit down on this bench for a little bit and you're good to go. I get what they were going for with wanting to have a way of restoring health throughout dungeons, but I don't know, maybe they could have just used something like this Mako crystallization gives off these healing powers or some shit. Fuck, I don't know, man, just something else. In a game that tries super hard to be realistic, they kind of missed the mark with that one, I think. I mean, at least with staying at it in, it makes sense because you can get a good night's sleep, you can sprawl out, stuff like that, not just sit there. Final Fantasy aside though, this mechanic is a long-running trope of JRPGs in general. Basically every JRPG from the 8-bit generation and onwards uses this mechanic as a method to restore HP. To my knowledge, the game that popularized this mechanic in the first place was none other than the original Dragon Quest. Dragon Quest created a lot of mainstays of the JRPG genre, and this was no exception. Even though it started it, the game that created the most widely recognized version of this mechanic was definitely Pokemon and their Pokécenters. It doesn't even matter if you like RPGs or currently play games at all anymore. If you were a kid in the 90s, you can relate to the feeling of having one of your Pokemon being poisoned, trying to time out the number of steps exactly required to make it back to the Pokécenter in time before the poor bastard kicked the bucket.
I'm fucking dying, man!
And by kick the bucket, I mean temporarily faint for about 10 seconds before you take him back to Nurse Joy and she revives a little critter back to full health, free of consequence and money. On the topic of RPGs, besides other common ways like using items or healing magic, another popular method of restoring health they had is to incorporate some type of saving/healing point either right before a boss or as a checkpoint. I mean, this ranges from stuff like save stones, to save crystals, to save spheres, to save orbs, and even in more recent games. For example, something like Dark Souls uses bonfires. Yeah, it doesn't really make much sense necessarily, but it's okay, because similar to the mushrooms from Mario games, it's become iconic in its own way, and there's something to be said about that. Restoring health in video games doesn't have to be realistic as long as it's memorable in some way, because honestly, are any of us really playing games for realism anyway? Usually I find the more a game focuses on being realistic, the less it ends up focusing on actually being fun, which is obviously the most important thing in video games and hobbies in general. And this is definitely not a shot at Red Dead Redemption 2 or anything. Definitely. Who am I kidding? It absolutely is. So fuck it.
Shit!
Give me a mushroom, an ancient tribal mask, a piece of heart, a piece of paper, a piece of Play-Doh, a piece of hair, piece of pizza, piece of shit, whatever. Just make it fun. So there you have it, folks. Health and video games. Hopefully you enjoyed the new structure of the video. I don't know if we'll do a format like this all the time, but just trying it out. Anyway, thinking of all this random useless knowledge kind of made me a little tired, so I think I'm gonna go sit on a bench. See you guys.